Welcome to First Look, Washington Post Live's one-stop shop for news and analysis. I'm Jonathan Capehart, associate editor at the Washington Post. Well, folks, we are barreling towards a federal government shutdown at midnight after Speaker Mike Johnson's Plan A and Plan B went down in a ball of flames at the hands of President-elect Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and his own Republican House majority. And we'll get into that with the Opinions Roundtable. But we're going to start overseas, where American diplomats are in the Syrian capital of Damascus for the first time in a decade. This comes after last week's trip to the Middle East by Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Joining me now is someone who was covering that trip, Michael Birnbaum, national security reporter at the Washington Post. Michael, welcome to First Look.
Jonathan, thanks for having me.
So, Michael, talk to us about today's news that American diplomats are in Damascus. What are their goals?
Well, it really is an extraordinary moment. If you think back just 2 or 3 weeks ago, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was still in power, and rebels were making an advance on the capital, but there really wasn't necessarily an expectation that he would collapse, ending more than 50 years of his family's rule over Syria. The officials, senior State Department officials who are in Damascus right now are there. It's the first senior level American outreach in Damascus in, as you said, more than a decade. And they're there to talk to the rebel leaders, now the de facto leaders of Syria, to try to impress the U.S. priorities, the Biden administration's priorities for some sort of peaceful transition of power, a political discussion that would ensure the rights of minorities in Syria. There are a lot of questions about how the new leaders of Syria are going to rule. And so those senior diplomats are in town to try to make first contact with the leaders. And they're also there to try to figure out the fate of Austin Tice, an American journalist who had done some work for the Washington Post, who disappeared 12 years ago in Syria.
And I was going to ask you about that in a little bit. Earlier this week in Damascus, the special UN envoy to Syria said, and I'm going to quote, "There is a lot of hope that we can now see the beginning of a new Syria." What are his reasons for such optimism?
Well, so what both he said and what the senior U.S. diplomats I've been talking to have been saying is that the new leaders, it's this rebel group named Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. This is a group that at one point was affiliated with al-Qaeda, that has had ties to the Islamic State, but it renounced those ties years ago. So there have been questions about what kind of rule it would bring to Syria. What I've heard is that they're saying all the right things. That they are saying they want an inclusive rule. They don't want to restrict the rights of minority groups, including Christians and some Muslim minority groups. They seem to be pretty disciplined and very well organized in terms of telling diplomats what they want to hear. The question is, how will their behavior actually shape up, and will it match what they're saying? And so, it's a lot of regional powers are uncertain about what's going to happen. Turkey has been a big backer of this rebel group. That unsettles a lot of the Arab countries that border Syria as well. So it's a really unsettled and fascinating time. But clearly the fact that there are these senior U.S. diplomats in town in Damascus right now is an indication that the first signs that the United States has received have been positive. They wouldn't send these people if they expected to have incredibly contentious conversations in town.
And this is happening, excuse me, in the waning days of the Biden administration. A month from today, Donald Trump will be inaugurated, the 47th president of the United States. So what's the Biden administration strategy to get a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and get all the hostages freed in the time that he has left in office?
So switching gears a little bit to Israel and Gaza, they are trying what they've been trying for more than a year now. They continue to talk to Hamas. CIA Director Bill Burns was in Cairo for talks earlier this week. He's left now. There have been indications that Hamas has been more open to making concessions, to seeming to want a deal. All along, the Israeli leadership has indicated if the conditions are right, they're open to a deal too. But we've been here before, and I think that there is split even inside the Biden administration about how likely it is, how realistic it is to achieve some sort of deal before the end of their term. There are real questions. I think they recognize that if there is a deal, it probably is going to be framed in such a way, both by the Israelis and potentially even by Hamas, as a political win for the Trump administration. There's really no currency in handing a win to the Biden folks on their way out. So that doesn't mean it wouldn't happen before January 20th, but it probably does mean that certainly Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to be trying to frame his future relations with Trump in the best light.
Michael, I jumped ahead of excuse me, I jumped ahead of myself with that question. I forgot to ask you to give us a little more detail, if you have any, about the administration's any information they have on the latest on the whereabouts of Austin Tice, who, as you mentioned earlier, has been held captive in Syria since 2012.
So this has been it's been a priority for the Biden administration for years. It's been a top priority for them for the last couple of weeks as we've seen this real, collapse of Assad's control, and the hope that if Austin Tice is alive, if he was in custody, that the moment of Assad's departure and the opening up of all of these prisons would be a time to find him. If he were alive, that he would walk out. That has been the hope. It continues to be the hope. As you mentioned, I traveled with Secretary of State Antony Blinken to the region last week. I've been in contact with some of the diplomats who are working the Austin Tice file. They have been asking everybody they can, including the ruling rebel group now, if there's any sign of Austin Tice, please let the Americans know. They're continuing to look. Roger Carstens, who is Biden's senior, he's the special envoy for hostage affairs. He is among the senior U.S. diplomats who has traveled to Damascus to meet with leadership about Austin Tice. The family remains hopeful. President Biden has said that he believes that Austin Tice is still alive, but so far there aren't any signs of him yet.
One person you didn't mention is Russian President Vladimir Putin. Yesterday, Putin said he would ask Bashar al-Assad, who is in Moscow, if he had any information on Tice's whereabouts. Any chance Putin will play a constructive role here?
Putin said that yesterday in the context of his marathon annual news conference. He was pretty pessimistic about the chances that Assad would have any information about it. I think that Putin is indeed looking for roads into a positive, or whatever bonus points he can curry with President Trump. He said at that same press conference he's ready to have constructive discussions with Trump about the future of Ukraine. It's possible that he could bring that up with Bashar al-Assad, who is now in Moscow. It's a little hard for me to imagine that that is a route that's going to yield any information.
Let me get you. We only have a couple of minutes left. I'm trying to figure out which of all the important questions I have to ask you is the most important. So let me just do the one that's next in line. And this one is about, again, Putin and his marathon press conference yesterday. He said that Russia has made military gains in Ukraine and that Russia is better off economically and militarily because he sent troops to Ukraine almost 3 years ago. Michael, is that even true?
Well, Putin has put Russia on a war footing. He's put the economy on a war footing. It's really reoriented around the production of missiles, munitions, other equipment for its war in Ukraine, but it's also suffering really intense financial sanctions from the West, from other Ukrainian allies. Inflation is bad. The reserves are running out. He's right. Putin is right that the Russian economy has been much more resilient than many leaders had hoped when they imposed those sanctions almost 3 years ago after the invasion of Ukraine. But at the same time, the Russian economy is showing some signs of weakness. At the same time, the Russian war effort is doing pretty well in Ukraine. Ukraine is losing territory. It's in a tough spot.
Well, Michael Birnbaum, national security reporter at the Washington Post. Thank you very much for coming to First Look. Have a good weekend.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan.
Time for the Opinions Roundtable. So let's go to the opinion side of the Washington Post, where we will find Brady Bunk's boxes. Yes, we've got them. Washington Post columnist E.J. Dionne and Megan McArdle.
I am sorry I'm jiggling around here. I had connection problems, and I'm using my phone to talk to you and Megan.
Okay, coming to us from the cyclone in Coney Island.
Exactly,
E.J.
that's
Megan.
what it looks like, Jonathan. Great to be with you.
Yeah, E.J. Megan, welcome back to First Look. Okay, we have to start by talking about what on earth is happening at the Capitol as we speak. We are 14 hours away from a government shutdown. Plan A went down in a ball of flames after Elon Musk and President-elect Donald Trump torpedoed that bill and it failed. Then Speaker Johnson came up with Plan B. So Plan A was like more than 1,000 pages. Plan B was about 116 pages, and that went down in a ball of flames with 38 Republicans voting against it, even though President-elect Donald Trump said this is quote unquote all caps success. Now, Speaker Johnson has been shown on camera walking through the halls of the Capitol saying that they, quote, we've got a plan and they're going to vote on it at some point this morning. They've been meeting since 7:30 this morning. EJ, I will start with you, but this is for both you and Megan. We don't even know what this Plan C is, so leave that aside. Are we headed to a shutdown?
It feels very much like we're headed to a shutdown right now. I mean, this is what happens when a billionaire who knows nothing about politics intervenes at the last minute after people in Congress had been working really hard for 2 weeks, more than that, for 4 weeks to try to put a deal together. What is the core problem here? The core problem here is that the Republican Party in the House is not a governing party because a significant chunk of that party only wants to be in the opposition and is only comfortable to be in being in the opposition. That means that for this Congress, it's not perpetual, but for this Congress, almost every important thing that's happened had to happen with a lot of Democratic votes. Mike Johnson looked at this history and said, okay, we want to get all this stuff settled. So he negotiated with the Democrats. They made a deal. And by the way, a lot of the stuff in that bill about health care and cancer research and all that was bipartisan stuff. Trump condemned it as Democratic. He didn't use the word pork, but that's effectively what he said. A lot of it was stuff both parties wanted. They put it in that bill. Johnson would have had the votes to get the 2/3 majority he needed because he had to rush it on the floor. And then Elon Musk killed it at the very last minute. Now, conservatives, 38 people, as you noted, defied Trump because Trump at the last minute said, oh, we want an extension of the debt ceiling passed now. And 38 conservatives were principled and said, no, we can't vote for this. And so now we're in this mess. It's very hard to see how they get a bill passed under current circumstances. Mm-hmm. The only thing I can think of is they try to get those conservatives on board by dropping the debt ceiling part of it. and try to jam the Senate. But I don't think they're going to have the votes for that either.
Megan, your turn.
I think this is one in an ongoing series of self-inflicted disasters for the GOP. Now, look, I think that I am somewhat sympathetic to Mike Johnson's position. It's not just that, a chunk of his caucus does not want to do anything. And I think, although I think that that is indeed a big problem, it's also that he has a very narrow majority. And so he's dependent on the most radical, most oppositional members of his caucus, or he has to go over to the Democrats, which of course alienates more people in his caucus. And look, I actually have some sympathy with Elon Musk's critique of this bill. We have massive fiscal problems, and we are rushing out a deal to spend more money. That said, that's the reality. That's the political reality of this Congress. It is going to be the political reality of the next Congress, because the majorities are going to be even worse. And I think that this is something that as we go forward with Elon Musk having influence, this is going to create a bunch of problems because Elon Musk thinks like a businessman. He wants to, you start with zero-based budgeting, you start with the number zero, and then you figure out how much money you have to spend, and then you allocate that money accordingly. The government, the political logic of the government does not do that. You cannot start with zero and then say, oh, well, I guess we're not doing Social Security checks this year. And so, look, a government shutdown has never worked for Republicans. It's not going to work this time. It's always a disaster. They sort of tout this one vague victory they had with Obama. And that was a long time ago. In general, these things, they make voters angry. They don't result in cuts to spending. They don't result in anything except chaos in the government that benefits no one.
And just could I add to that, Jonathan?
Yeah.
I think that the part of the problem for Republicans is government shutdown is now branded to them the way, for better or worse, taxes and spending is branded to Democrats, because they started using this tactic way back in the Gingrich days. It's going to be very hard for them to duck responsibility for this shutdown. And you saw Democrats on the floor had little signs for everything they said that said Republican shutdown. That's because that's where the branding of that is. And they did indeed cause this because of Elon Musk.
I'm actually going to disagree with that just a little bit. Is that if we remember when Democrats shut down the government about 6 years ago, they were working on the assumption that Republicans always take the blame for that because it's branded to them. And in fact, they had to back down real fast because it turns out that the party that starts the shutdown gets the blame for the shutdown. But I will add to that, in this case, that's the Republicans. They own this and they need to fix it.
I don't know if it's the party that starts the shutdown gets the blame. It's usually the party that's in control of the White House. And the president gets the blame, but President Biden is not in any of this. And in fact, Donald Trump, the former president and the president-elect, is fully involved in this to the point of, he was all over his social media platform, railing against Plan A, and then saying that Plan B was great. And now he's out on his social media platform saying that if there is a shutdown, it's not our fault. Blame the Democrats. EJ, how? That's not going to work, is it? Especially when Republicans in the 118th Congress, the one that we are in right now, have the majority, and a majority that is bigger than the one they're going to have in the 119th Congress.
100% right. And I think both you and Megan alluded to something very important here. We have not seen a president-elect, let alone a non-elected billionaire who's an advisor to the president-elect, but we've never seen a president-elect intervene like this in a policy matter before he's even inaugurated. Trump is acting as if he is already the president of the United States. And he can't do that. He doesn't have the power. And I think Biden has stayed out of it because he said, look, none of this was on track. We all signed off on a deal. I'm not going to own any of this when it's caused by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And I think people I think as a result of this, start asking a lot of questions about Elon Musk. What interests does he have at stake? Why is he intervening on this particular proposal? He's got to be accountable if he's going to have all this power, enough power to create a crisis that may lead to a government shutdown.
So let's talk more about Speaker Johnson and the bigger issue he's facing. Um, and that is whether he's going to hang on to the Speaker's gavel when the 119th Congress, after the 119th Congress gets sworn in on January 3rd. Megan, do you think that what we're seeing right now spells doom for his being able to hang on to the gavel?
Well, I mean, I certainly think you have to think that it is less likely today than you did at the beginning of the week. That said, who wants this job? This job is an albatross. It has benefited no one who had it. Mike Johnson has actually done better than a lot of his predecessors. It is a disastrously difficult job precisely because the Republican caucus does not think seriously about policymaking. And look, I would love to see them cut the government. I would love to see the government spend less and do less. That's, I'm a libertarian. I want to move us in that direction. But the Republican caucus is not serious about that, because in order to seriously do that, you have to be willing to make hard choices. You have to set priorities, and you have to be able to pass big legislation, not through this last minute scramble, but in a carefully thought out, systematic way that moves the government in the direction they say they want. And they have not done any of that for the better part of a decade.
And
And so who wants to herd the cats towards the side of the lemming cliff? I guess it's herd the lemming.
And you know
sorry,
who agrees with
terribly
you,
good
Megan?
metaphor.
I want to say John Boehner agreed with you. He walked away and said this isn't any good. Paul Ryan looked at this job after he had it and said this isn't any good. And I think, to go to your question, Jonathan, I think Mike Johnson is in a lot of trouble right now because they're going to have a functional 2-seat majority, and they're going to have to get all the votes for a new speaker at the moment out of the Republican conference. Democrats, after Johnson busting this deal, will not want to elect Mike Johnson. And it's ironic because about a week ago, Mike Johnson was in good shape for the speakership. Everybody kind of agreed that he should be elected. And now his resumption of the speakership is very much in jeopardy. But Megan is absolutely right. Who will want this job and who can possibly keep it? In the Senate, a couple of senators, Rand Paul for one, they say, let's elect Elon Musk as speaker, which you could do. You don't have to be a member of the House to be the speaker. And I guess that would be the entire absurd upshot of all this, Speaker Elon Musk.
I mean, Speaker Elon Musk is already showing how shambolic you would be in the job. The one thing that Speaker Johnson doesn't have to worry about anymore is the one person can issue a motion to vacate. It'll now take 9 votes. But I wonder, is there anyone on the horizon who could be the next speaker if Johnson can't get the votes?
Well, you had a lot of people go down the last time. Tom Emmer from Minnesota is a logical person, but he went down because he's too moderate. I think you've got the problem that a group of anywhere from 5 or 8 to 38, depending on how big the dissenting group is, can block somebody. But it's not clear that they have the power to elect somebody to the speakership because the rest of the party would like somebody at least reasonably reasonable, if I could use that phrase, to run the place. So I'm not clear where it goes from Johnson, but I'm sure you're going to see some people saying, I'd like this in the next few weeks, even though it's a terrible job.
Megan,
I have
any
no
names?
idea.
No.
I have no idea. I just shrug emoji. Who want this job? Who could get the job? I just I am
Megan, I
aghast.
nominate you. Why not? You'll be better than Elon
Sure,
Musk.
sure, I'd be great. You can just see me wrangling the House members on the floor.
Breaking news: Megan McArdle throws her name in for Speaker of the House. One more question on the machinations in the House and the budget and everything. As I mentioned a moment ago, we are 14 hours, 36 minutes, and 38 seconds from a government shutdown. Will a deal be struck if not tonight, by Monday morning, do you think, EJ?
You know, I was talking to people up there last night, and they were pretty pessimistic that if they don't sort of get this done before the shutdown, before the deadline, this could go on for a while, that they'd run it through Christmas and maybe longer. As I said earlier, I think the only way Johnson can possibly try to jam the Senate is take the debt ceiling out, pass the simple extension with the farm aid in it, and the disaster aid, and try to see if they can get a majority of Republicans. But I still think there are enough conservatives, on the right end of the fiscal right of the party, that they might not even be able to get that through. Senator Schumer over in the Senate said, "Look, try to put our old deal that you all agreed to a vote." And I suspect there'll be movement today to try to get a vote on the original deal. I just don't know if they can get the 2/3, because I don't know how many Republicans will now go south on that after all the pressure from Musk and Trump. It's very hard to get to a solution right now.
Yeah, I think the answer is that Trump really wants some sort of deal, right? He does not want to come into office with a shutdown happening. He does want to come into office with the debt ceiling lifted. And that will pressure his caucus towards doing something. But honestly, I can't say I'm super optimistic that they're going to get anything done before the shutdown. And I think that, yes, once that starts, they're going to let the clock tick for a while. Because the weird thing about a shutdown is that there's a bunch of tricks the government can use to delay the pain. And in fact, well, in some cases, the administration doesn't want to delay the pain. The administration wants to force Congress to act by shutting down the national parks and doing all these, shutting down the most visible, most painful stuff first. In this case, the Biden administration might want to delay the pain so that it hits Trump just as he enters office. And so I think that there is going to be some pressure to do a deal, but it's going to take a while. If they let this tip into shutdown, we're going to go for a bit.
But if just on your point, Megan, if we let it go until Trump gets into office, that is a very, very, very long time to keep the government shut. I think there will be pressure. One member told me that she figured after Christmas they'll come back and there'll be enough pain already that people will say, let's do something to fix this. So my guess, and it's only a guess, would be if it shuts down, it'll probably go through Christmas. I think they'll try to avoid going through the new year, but going to January 20th would be a real mess for our country.
Wait a minute, EJ. Right, fingers crossed. But EJ, when this member of Congress told you this, did you push back and say, are you guys thinking about staying in town? How on earth can you shut down, let the government shut down at Christmas?
Well, this member is a Democrat who wanted to make the original deal and thought there was plenty of room. She was talking about what she thought the Republicans would do from what she was hearing, because there's a lot of pressure to go home for Christmas. I agree with you, Jonathan. It's not a great look. And maybe they'll stay a couple of days into next week before Christmas to try to come to a deal. But they had a plan. It would have worked fine. Trump would have taken over, and then they could have tried to run the government on their own. But they don't have the votes right now on the Republican side. And Elon Musk was not willing to face that fact, because a lot of people who have that much power in business assume that people will just do what they say. And that can work for a CEO. It doesn't work in a democratic process.
Yes, small d democratic process. EJ,
correct. Thank you.
Go ahead, Megan, real quick.
Hopefully, once people realize that the NORAD Santa tracker is shut down, Congress will have to rush back into office.
There you go. That's
God
right.
bless you. You went to space. Our mind really is on Elon Musk,
Wow, that's right. Pandemonium if little kids can't figure out where Santa is. This Megan,
disaster.
I'm gonna keep. Okay, so EJ, how much time do we have? Okay, less than 3 minutes, but let's talk about someone who we haven't talked much about in this entire conversation, and that's President Biden. But you had a column this week defending his legacy and encouraging progressives to get to work joining you. And you wrote, and I want to quote, A far more pressing imperative is to prevent Donald Trump's victory from discrediting Biden's genuinely impressive accomplishments and the course he set for the country, which was broadly correct. EJ, why doesn't President Biden get the credit he deserves?
Well, he doesn't get the credit he deserves, partly because prices stayed high after the inflation spike of 2022. That's probably the main reason, partly because I think in the end, the Biden administration itself did not do a great job of selling his program. But in the end, when you look at where the economy is when he leaves office, the inflation rate and the unemployment rate, 16 million jobs created, but also these long-term investments that are going to kick in when Trump takes office, the infrastructure investments, the Chips and Science Act, which create a lot of jobs, blue-collar jobs in the tech area, and also the investments in climate. This is a real record, plus a lot of the regulatory stuff, taking monopoly seriously. It's a really long record. And my point is that if the whole Biden record gets discredited the way Herbert Hoover's record got discredited after the Great Depression, unfortunately for Hoover, he was president for 4 years, while 3 years, while the Depression, after the crash and the Depression sank in. If Biden's record is discredited, a lot of these ideas are discredited. And when they come back to power, Democrats are going to move toward ideas very similar to Biden. So I think it's important to defend this record.
Megan, is EJ right that the direction that President Biden laid out for the country was broadly correct? Now we really do have actually less than 90 seconds.
I have my quarrels with the Biden administration, and especially with the implementation. You've seen things like, I actually supported, oddly for a libertarian, increasing our electric vehicle charging infrastructure, but they botched it. We didn't get the infrastructure rolled out, in part because they kept larding it down with other progressive priorities. You also saw this with the CHIPS Act, where chip plants had to provide subsidized childcare and all of these other progressive priorities that kept them from moving stuff out speedily enough for the Biden administration to take credit for it. And I also think, the reality is that one of the main reasons that the Biden administration has not gotten credit for it is that Biden has not been a good spokesman for his own cause for years. And I think I loathe to tout another publication, the Wall Street Journal did a great look back on exactly how long the cover-up of Biden's condition had gone on. It looks like it stretches back to at least 2021. And that he was not capable of either, I'm going to be honest, fully executing the duties of the presidency, which he turned over to aides to a really worrying amount, but of selling his proposals. And that I'm afraid that I think that is ultimately going to be the main legacy that is how history is going to remember Joe Biden.
I think that the difficulty he had in selling the legacy goes to Megan's point, and I think there were issues on that side. But I still think the policy legacy itself needs to be defended for the sake of the future.
EJ Dionne, Megan McArdle, we got to go, as always, when we're up and running and with a good conversation. Thank you both very much for coming back to First Look. Happy holidays, and see you in 2025.
And to you too, and to Megan. And sorry for my technological difficulties, but thanks to the control room for getting me in.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yes, thanks to the control room. And again, thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. For more of these important conversations, sign up for a Washington Post subscription. Get a free trial by visiting washingtonpost.com/live. Again, that's washingtonpost.com/live. I'm Jonathan Capehart. Thank you for watching or tuning into Washington Post Live's First Look. See you in 2025.